So, as Terence mentioned, the album we're talking about is called End Terrain, and it will be out on the 5th of April through Profound Law Records. You mentioned that in some ways that End Terrain is a reaction to your previous album, New Catastrophisms. Did I say that correctly?
Hmm. Catastrophism. Yeah.
Catastrophisms.
That's a tough one. Yeah. Yeah.
In the sense that the previous album was done in the improvised manner of your earlier recordings, and this one was much more structured.
Hmm.
Going into this album, did you guys have a good sense of what you wanted it to sound like?
Yeah. Yes, I think we were definitely like, we wanted these kind of big, I mean, riffs. Like Andre had these kind of like circular kind of tapping lead things that he was doing. And I was like, these are great. Like, and I knew that was a big element of it.
Speaking of Priest, like it's very riffy in that sense. Like it does have that kind of classic.
I texted him today because he told me to listen to the new Priest album, and I was like, I know why you like this. Like, I was like, it's like because there's all these like all these
Yeah,
crazy leads, and I'm like, dude, this is like, I get it, and like, I mean, it's a great record, but and I can talk about it all the time, but I think, and I know where Andre's coming from a lot with like this kind of King Crimson kind of influence and the prog kind of aspect. And I thought it was interesting, like how much, the riffs that we were recording that he was writing, I know for him it was not just this kind of metal influence, like he was really into like Public Image Limited and Keith Levine's style, which is very like circular and repetitive and not very punk, right? Like he was playing an aluminum guitar, it's very clangy, or like Asa's guitar parts in Lungfish, the post punk band, like which are influences that all of us share, like in the band. So we're like, I knew that that's kind of like his brain was kind of going there, and that was a part of it. But like to us, like we don't want to like yeah, man, I could talk to you about Judas Priest all day, but I don't want to make a record that sounds like them. Like I don't want to even try. Like that's not me. Like I don't want to make a record that sounds like Lungfish either. Like that's kind of been at the core of the band was always like yeah, like Sun's awesome, but if I dressed in a robe and played the same note slowly for an hour, I think I'd lose my mind. Like I can never, and I don't think that that's a worthy, like it's kind of like a cover band to me, and I really don't. That's like the aspect of metal I don't like, where it's like acceptable to just like, oh, we're a death metal band that sounds just like a '90s death metal band. It's like,
yeah,
really? Like, because I can put on Monstrosity right now, and I'll be very happy. I'll be happier listening to that than to you. Like
yeah.
it's just I'll never understand that kind of, or like the thrash revival. It's like thrash was pretty awesome. Like Voivod's still around and are phenomenal. Like I don't need any of this. Like I don't know. Like that's me. That's like my personal, like what bothers me, because like to me it's like music needs to move forward and be creative. Like we're totally inspired by our influences in thrash. Like that's definitely like Steven's probably like, biggest moment was like in the West thrash was around. Like that's like his favorite time period of metal next to like 90s death metal. But like if we were just doing that, I think it'd be what are you bringing? Like you're bringing nothing. You're doing nothing new, And I think, I mean, a lot of those subgenres exist and thrive, and that's fine. But it's not where I want to be. Like I think it's more exciting to kind of like mix it up and have like a little like nod to the thrash, or a nod like to Tom G Warrior in the song, and just be like, dude, maybe someone else will pick up on that. I hope they do, because we're huge fans. So it's like, it's exciting for us to kind of like be on that edge of like, are people going to get this? Or are they going to, is it going to be too like, you know, like we're moving too fast or something between different genres? But yeah.
Yeah, honestly, you're preaching to the choir because I had such a reaction to all the revival movements because like the joke I like to make is that I was listening to old school death metal when it was just called death metal. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Me too.
And I remember when thrash was this revolutionary sound, and these bands weren't trying to bring something back. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the one band Slayer wasn't listening to when they were writing Rain and Blood with Slayer.
Yeah, or I think even it's like I grew up probably in a similar time period where I always felt when people were like explaining death metal to me, and I like got Obituary, and I was like, oh, okay. And then I got Morbid Angel. I'm like, this doesn't sound like Obituary. And then I got Deicide. I'm
Exactly,
like, well,
yeah.
that doesn't sound like. And then to me, it was just like, oh, I get it. It's like it's about what you're saying, the speed you're playing it at. Like it's pretty grim, like, and that to me kind of set the tone of like it doesn't all have to sound the same, But I think at the same, like I think that, but then that makes bands like Blood Incantation or Cerebral Rot or whoever like stand out more because they're so good at what they're doing and pushing it in this other direction that you're like, okay, it's not like Nocturnus. It's like doing its own thing, like, and I appreciate that about some of the newer bands, like that. I'm like, I like that about Tomb Mold or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
this is beautiful, like what with their take on it is interesting to me,
Yeah. I mean, we are coming out of this revival period, and the irony is, I mean, I think very predictably, all the bands that were doing the old school revival thing, now that they're 3-4 albums into their career, they're experimenting with like rock and roll. They're experimenting with prog. The songs are getting longer.
Sure. Yeah.
Which is exactly what the original death metal bands did, back in the early 90s. So
yeah. I like control denied, my friend.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's I think it opens things up, and I hope in the end I think it makes an audience hopefully more like, oh, like the palette can be wider and more expansive, and like there's room for your entire synth rock album.
Right. Can you tell me a little bit about the concept behind Entrain?
Sure. Every record we write, we kind of have a theme, and I think with this album, we definitely were trying to. There was definitely like the mantra in the studio was, well, we haven't done this before. Let's try it. And that was definitely on our minds as I was like writing the lyrics. So on one hand, I decided kind of early on that I wanted to write the lyrics from like my perspective, like a future, like a letter from a parent to kind of like to the past, like to the future generations from the past, as that makes any sense, through this kind of lens that we tend to write through, which is like about environmentalism and catastrophe. And I was just thinking about, like, I'm a parent, and just kind of this attitude that like we really haven't generated, like we haven't really helped save the planet that much, and that our legacy shouldn't be mourned in a way, and that like the subsequent generations should kind of move on and not look back, because we really haven't left them with much to survive on, to live with. And I think if that was a different perspective, was kind of like making it more personal, like about this regret that I was like kind of channeling, or something that wasn't making the situation better in some way. And that, there's going to be subsequent generations that will deal with, kind of what we're leaving behind, whether that be microplastics or different types of toxic waste and brown fields and gray fields and all that stuff. And like, what is the legacy of all this destruction? And that kind of became the story, the narrative that we were working with, was describing this future landscape, and kind of like that generations would continue until eventually, like it would end at some point. And that was the theme. A very pleasant theme.
Now, when you say narrative, is this something that you can follow from song to song, from beginning to end?
Yes, and that's the intent. We hope is that it is like a prog inspired idea of like from start to finish. There's this album kind of, and it's very deliberate where things are and what it's about. That's the intent. And there's actually like a book of short stories that comes with like the LP and CD called Our Dead Age. It's like I wrote them and also had like some help from some AI to write a few other ones, and they're credited because it's funny. But we wanted the world to feel like bigger a little bit in some way, like of the album. So we kind of Andre and Steven were like, you should write some stories, and I hadn't really written for a bit and decided that I wrote one. And I was like, I can do this. This is fun. So I wrote like 9 short, short experimental stories that kind of go along with the album, and hopefully it kind of expands the world a little bit, you know.
So you're a visual artist, but do you also do fiction writing?
Yeah, yes, I have, and I do. I kind of took a break. I was like working on a novel and just felt like I couldn't solve it, and I have a friend. There's this really great writer. His name's Jeremy Bushnell. He's written some great books, and he was like, he read my novel and was like, I think this needs to be longer. I was like, oh my God. Like, he's like, I think it just needs to feel like you could never finish it, like as a reader. And I was like, I don't know if I can write that novel. But then I started, I was like, I think he's right. And I was like, all right. So I kind of was like, I'm taking a break. I got to think of the other stories that fit into that novel. And then I was on the break when my bandmates were like, you should write some other stuff for like short, just like, don't even think about it, just write it. And then it just like happened really quickly, actually, for entering.